Hey guys, it's Carl Allen from Dealmaker Wealth Society, and today I'm going to teach you all about negotiation in deals in what I call my 567 deal negotiation blueprint. So this system is made up of the 18 steps that I successfully use over the course of my career to buy and sell more than 330 businesses across every sector imaginable. Now, you might not need all 18 steps for your deal, but the more you know about the skills and the tools, the better you are at negotiating. So in this video, I'm going to break the process down into the 3 layers covering all 18 steps. So let's get started. So first of all, let me tell you about the layers. So the great thing about negotiation is it's not an isolated event in the process of buying a business or doing a deal. Negotiation actually starts at the very, very first point that you ever speak to or touch or communicate with a seller, and it ends at the very second that you actually sign the legal contract to buy or sell the business. So let me tell you what the layers are. So the first layer is what I call the foundation layer. So these are the negotiation tactics that you start very, very early, and it tees up the rest of the negotiation in the deal. Now, the second layer in the negotiation is the deal layer. So it's the negotiation tactics that are specific to the deal that you're looking to close. And then finally, we've got the closing layer, because there are some specific strategies and tools that you need at the final hurdle to physically get the deal over the line. And I'm going to walk you through the 5 aspects of the foundation layer, the 6 aspects of the deal layer, and then the 7 aspects of the closing layer. So let's start off with the foundation layer. So there are 5 elements to building a really solid foundation in the negotiation of any deal. So the first one is what we call KLT. It's know, like, and trust. So if you've been following my training around deal origination and meeting sellers, then you should be building relationships, you should be building rapport, you should be building trust and credibility as part of your deal. So because small businesses are bought and sold between people, you as the buyer or you and your partners as the buyer, and then the seller as the shareholder, the major owner of the business, it happens between 2 people. So to make this work successfully, you have to get the seller to know you, to like you, and to trust you. And that starts at the very first point of communication with the seller. The next part of the foundation layer is what I call the safe pair of hands. So the safe pair of hands, in most leverage buyouts, you're targeting a distressed seller of a good business. So you're the person, you're the new custodian of that business that's going to take it on and is going to take it to the next level. And you want the seller cheering you on from the sidelines. Now, in about 20% of cases, sellers are just looking for cash. We filter those sellers out as part of our deal origination. What we're looking for is the business owner, the seller, that doesn't necessarily want the maximum amount of cash. They want other things. They want somebody that's a safe pair of hands in the deal, that can safeguard the employees, can protect the legacy of the business, the culture of the business, can make sure that customers and suppliers continue to be treated in the way that they have when the owner had the business. And remember, you're talking about a business owner that since the inception of their business, they've probably spent more time in their business than they have with their own family. So the safeguarding piece, the safe pair of hands, is absolutely critical. The next step in the foundation layer for negotiation is what I call credo. So it's all about your credibility. It's you buying a business in a sector that you know, that you understand, that you're passionate about, you can add massive value to as the new business owner, and you potentially have a network that you can leverage inside of that deal. And think about it. If you're a tired business owner and you're looking to gracefully retire, and 2 people come in to want to buy your business, one of them knows nothing about your business, knows nothing about your industry, knows nothing about anything really, can't add any value, has got nothing to add, no leverage, in terms of their network, but the other person that comes in has got the credibility, knows the industry, knows your business, is building rapport, has got value to add, and has got a network to leverage. If the two offers were the same, you're probably going to go with the more qualified individual. So it's really important as part of your negotiation that A, you stay in your lane, and B, you leverage that in the conversations with the seller. Now, the fourth part of the foundation layer occurs when you first meet the seller face to face, or if you're doing it on a Zoom call, if it's a deal that's far away from you. And it's what I call the 30 meeting questions. Now, we don't have time in this video to go through the 30 questions that you need to ask a seller in a specific order, but I'll just give you the top 3. So the first question that you're looking to ask is you want to understand, why is the seller looking to sell their business? Are they retiring? Are they ill? Are they just totally burnt out? Have they run out of ideas? Are they bored? You need to know why the owner is selling the business so that you can map the rest of the negotiation around it. The classic argument in negotiation for anything is find out what the other person wants and then give it to them. And you won't know the answer to that question until you ask them. The second question is you want to understand, how does the business grow? And what you'll find is that most small businesses do little to no marketing. They generate their revenues through recurring customers and word of mouth referrals. So if you know that you can put marketing into that business to grow it, that's a big part of your negotiation strategy. Because remember, in that safe pair of hands, the seller wants somebody that's going to be able to grow the business and take it to a level that they're not prepared to do. The third question in negotiation is understanding if there's anybody in the business that can be your general manager and run that business for you if you don't want to go in there every day and operate that business. So understanding that means you can play the deal around that point. If the seller's really focused on safe pairing and safeguarding the employees, knowing that you're going to promote people internally to run that business is going to be a massive part of the negotiation and a big tick in the box for you. And then the fifth part of the foundation layer is all about your deal origination funnel. Remember, this is a numbers game. It's highly unlikely that you're going to go and find one deal and close that deal as a leverage buyout where you're not putting any of your own money into that deal. You might get lucky, but generally the stats are about 1 in 10 to maybe 1 in 20, depending on the sector. So you need to have a deal origination funnel with lots of different opportunities in there. Number one, that gives you the ability to pivot and move from deal to deal as you go through negotiations. And remember, you're filtering those deals down every time that you have a conversation or you do some more research. So you might start off with 20 deals. You might only end up with 3 or 4 that are at these final negotiation stages. And the second part about having a funnel and playing the numbers is it changes your mindset when it comes to negotiation the deal. If you're focused on just one deal and you've got no other deals in the pipeline, then you might be tempted to get deal heat. And you don't want deal heat because that means you'll do whatever it takes to get that deal over the line. When you've got other deals in your pipeline that you can jump to, that you can pivot to, it completely changes your psychology when you're going through the negotiation. So that's the foundation layer. Next, let's move on to the deal layer. So in the deal layer, there are 6 negotiation tactics that you look to deploy when you're in the process of negotiating the deal. So it's when you create the letter of intent. So it's before due diligence, it's before closing, which comes in the final layer. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to create the offer sequence. Now, on my earlier video on YouTube, I took you through up to 6 steps where you can build an offer sequence, set negotiation boundaries, and have lots of different offers for the same deal in process, in sequence, to help you negotiate. So this is the core start of the deal negotiation layer. So on any business that you're looking to buy, before you make your very first offer, you want to have subsequent offers ready to sweeten the deal in lots of different ways whilst maintaining the cover ratio. So if you've not seen that video yet, it's inside of our YouTube channel, so go and watch that. It's a 20-minute video. It walks you through how offer sequences work, and that's a massive part of the deal negotiation layer. The next tool in the deal layer is creating the win-win deal. And what happens with a win-win deal is really you're looking to buy a business where the deal's a great win for you because you get a business without spending your own money. And secondly, it's a great win for the seller, and I've mentioned this before, because you're giving the seller what they want. And often that is not maximum cash at closing. They might want some cash in the deal, which you can pay over time through seller financing, but it's really understanding what they actually want. They might want to stay in the business as an employee. They might want to stay in the business as your general manager for a while. They might want to retain a small piece of the ownership and partner with you as you grow that business. And there might be things in that business that they're very specific about. They might not want you to change the name of the business. They might not want you to change the logo of the business. I've had both of those. I was able to buy a business instead of paying $300,000 at closing for a deal because I wouldn't get rid of the employees, I wouldn't change the name of the business, and I wouldn't change the logo in the business, which has been around from 1985. I was able to buy that business for $17,500 down and then pay only $150,000 in seller financing in the future. So creating a win-win is all about understanding what does the seller really want and really value, and then building your deal around that. The third part of the deal negotiation layer is if you're kind of still in the arm twisting stage and you can't quite get a deal agreed, the seller wants a higher valuation, then you can deploy the tool called confidence erosion. And what confidence erosion is the ability for you to go through the numbers, particularly the forecasts, and really put a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of doubt into the mind of the seller to convince them that their valuation is a premium valuation. It's too high for the business at this time. So normally when we're buying a business, we can only look at the historical results of the business. So it's all of the revenues and all of the earnings and the strength of the balance sheet up until today's day. We can't pay for future value. We can't pay for future revenues and future cash flows. If the business has a big contract that they're likely to win, that's going to generate some growth, and the seller wants that value locked into the deal now, you can't do that. You can't buy that future promise because there's no 100% certainty that it's going to happen. So you can put a lot of confidence erosion into that. You can say, well, Mr. Seller, what if that doesn't happen? What if there's a global pandemic? What if that business comes on hard times? What if something else happens, which means that contract doesn't happen, yet I've paid you for that? And the normal way that we deal with that in a deal is through something called an earnout, which again, I covered in the offer sequencing training. So go back and watch that. An earnout is where you're basically sharing in the upside of a deal. So if a deal generates lots of extra profits that were not forecasted, you keep some of that because obviously it's now your business, you've generated that growth, but you'll pay a bonus payment, a contingent payment to the seller. So that's how you deal with confidence erosion and earnouts. The next tool in the deal negotiation layer is what I call your negotiation style. Now, there's two elements to this. So the first one is you have to listen at least 3 times more than what you actually speak or say. So the way you elicit the answers to all these questions to help you build this negotiation layer stack is to really understand what the seller's actually looking for. So you shouldn't be doing the majority of the talking. When you're asking the seller questions, when you're understanding who they are, what they want, what their outcomes are in the deal, you have to listen a lot more. So you've got to be a great listener. So if you're somebody that always wants to speak first and always wants to talk all of the time, that's going to undermine your negotiation. So you have to learn to listen a lot more than you speak. And when I'm negotiating a deal, I adopt a particular persona, and I call it my late night FM DJ style. So rather talking with a lot of energy and a lot of passion and moving my arms, which you know I do when I'm teaching and coaching and doing videos like this, when I'm in a deal negotiation with a seller, I'm a lot calmer. And I'm often playing to what their style is. So if you've got an older retiring seller who's very calm, and very slow, then I'm going to talk in the same style. I'm going to get on their level, and it's another way of building rapport with that business owner. It's like non-verbal communication. You can mirror their body language. Um, if you're going to meet a seller in, say, the construction industry, and you know that business owner is going to be dressed down in overalls and boots, then don't walk in with a beautifully sharp suit and a shirt and tie. You know, dress down. I went to see a business last week in the construction industry, and I dressed down. And I went in one of my inexpensive cars. I didn't want to turn up in a flashy brand new Range Rover. I wanted to go in a car that was a little bit more less distinct and a little bit more under the radar. So it's all about your negotiation style. It's kind of mapping yourself a bit more to the seller, and that's going to really help you in the negotiation. Item number 5 in the deal layer is what I call pass the blame. And the pass the blame strategy comes down to your use of your advisors. So if you're working on a deal and you've got a lawyer involved, particularly at the heads of terms letter of intent stage, and there's certain things that your legal advisor is insisting go in that document, and the seller is kind of very resistant to that, and that's probably more coming from their advisors as well, then pass the blame. So your job's to keep the relationship with the seller as strong as possible. So all the difficult conversations, let the advisors have those. You just keep that great conversation with the seller. So if there's bad news on a deal, let your advisors deal with that. Your job is to focus exclusively on keeping the seller happy. And then the final part of the deal strategy is what I call the 2 offer strategy. And this is really interesting. What the 2 offer strategy is all about, and you can kind of combine this with the offer sequencing process that we talked about before, is sometimes you can make 2 simultaneous offers for the same business. So let's say you find a business and it's valued at $1 million, and $1 million is really what the seller's looking for. So your first offer could be, okay, Mr. Seller, I'm going to pay you $500,000 to buy this business, but I'm going to pay it all to you at closing, so you get all of your money up front, providing, of course, that you can finance that deal either yourself or through your financing partners that you're going to be bringing on board. The second offer on that deal might be, I'm not going to pay you $500,000, I'm not going to pay you $1 million. I might pay you $1.5 million or even $2 million, but I'm going to pay all of that money in seller financing. So I'm going to pay for it all in the future. And a general rule of thumb is if the business is making say $400,000 a year in cash flow, you want to be using about half of that cash flow for seller financing and the other half of that cash flow for yourself. So you can plan out how many years it's going to take you to pay that seller financing in that offer to strategy. So that's the deal layer. Finally, let's go on to the closing layer. So finally, let's go through the closing layer. So there's 7 parts to the closing layer. So the foundation stage of the deal is building that relationship and convincing the seller that you're the right person to take the business to the next level. The deal layer gets you through to the letter of intent. So you've signed an LOI, you know what you're paying for the business, you know the structure of the deal, you know what any special conditions are. So through due diligence and through all the legal work that has to be done to get the deal closed, you're going to go through 7 elements of the closing layer. So let's go through them. So the first one is what I call the seller rebound. So as part of your deal layer negotiation, you might have made an offer on a business that's been rejected. You might have made multiple offers on a business that have been rejected, and you've decided to walk away quite wisely from that deal and you're focusing on another deal. Then what happens, and a lot of this is time bound, is the seller in a lot of cases will rebound and come back to you and want to take the final deal that you've offered. And a lot of that could be seasonal. So you could have made an offer in, say, November, the seller's busy, it's Thanksgiving in the US, we've got Christmas holidays coming up, New Year, etc. And then they hit their business back in early January and it's cold and it's wet and it's dark and it's rainy and they're really frustrated and depressed, and they pull your offer letter out of the drawer and think, you know what, now I'm ready. I don't want to wait another 7 or 8 months before I go on vacation. I don't really want to be in my business anymore. It's a new year, new start. let's get out, let's sell, and they come back and they rebound. So it's always important as part of your deal origination is that you're constantly in touch with sellers, particularly around the kind of January time period, also in September when they've come back from a summer vacation and they're back in their business again, having spent a lot of quality time with their family. So any offer that you've ever made that's been rejected, at the very least in January and September, you should be calling those sellers back and finding out, did they sell the business? Is it still for sale? They might come back to you in the interim as well. The next point in the closing layer is what we call seller's remorse. Now, what seller's remorse is you get so far down the line in the deal and you're negotiating and it's getting through to the final stages, you're about to close. And the seller often gets remorseful. So they think, you know what, am I ready to sell? And that can be really, really painful. I had this on a deal literally right before Christmas last year. I actually signed to buy a business and then I was waiting for the seller to sign, but the seller pulled out. The seller decided they weren't ready to sell the business. It was really, really painful, and it's only happened to me like a handful of times over 330 plus deals. But the way to combat seller's remorse is go back to the relationship. So remembering all this stuff, the know, like, and trust, the safe pair of hands, the credibility that you have in that deal and in that sector, and all the questions that you've asked, proving yourself as the right person to take this business on. And then if you've asked all the right questions and you've listened enough and you're really, really understanding here why the owner is looking to sell, the frustration, the boredom, the retirement, the illness, whatever it is, you've just got to remind them of that to get the deal over the line. So that's seller's remorse. The next one is, as part of the closing element of buying a business, there's going to be some due diligence carried out. So there's three parts to due diligence. There's commercial due diligence, understanding where the business actually fits within its market, within its industry, what the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats are, and growth potential, the G-SWOT as I call it. There's also financial due diligence, where your CPA, your accountant, is going to be going through the books, making sure the taxes have been paid, reconciling the cash in the business, all those different things. And then there's legal due diligence, what your attorney or your lawyer will do, making sure the business has no major issues, like any pending litigation or anything really nasty that's happened in the business before that you need to be aware of. Now, sometimes through due diligence, there are issues that come up and you need to potentially change the structure of the deal. So that can be a sticky issue. But again, going back to the foundation layer, this is why this is so important. If you've built that relationship and you're the person the seller really wants, you can overcome a lot of these issues, because if you're doing due diligence and you found some issues, then anybody else that's looking to buy that business is going to have the same due diligence issues. So as long as you've built this solid foundation, it's a lot easier to overcome due diligence issues. The fourth part is what we call advisor friction. And advisor friction is where the seller has a lawyer and a CPA that is advising them on the deal, and for whatever reason, they're advising the seller not to take the deal. And the way to overcome that is get those advisors involved as early as you possibly can, ideally in the deal layer. What you don't want to do is agree a deal, sign a letter of intent, raise all the financing, be ready to close, and then the seller then brings their advisors on at the very last minute and they have the ability to talk them out of the deal. And again, remember, the foundation layer is also very, very important. The stronger that is, the stronger you can overcome any of these issues. But my great tip on advisor friction is have the seller get their advisors on board as early as possible so you can deal with any issues that they have, ideally in the deal negotiation section of the deal. The next issue that could potentially come up at closing is what we call net current assets. So when you're buying a business, then you're buying a business with an assumed amount of working capital that the business is going to have inside of it the day you buy it. And working capital, the accounting term is net current assets, but working capital is cash, it's accounts receivables, it's inventory, and it's all those things. So you've got to make sure that you've got the right amount of net working capital in the business, net current assets. Otherwise, if you buy it and the seller strips all that out, then you're not going to have the resources that you need to successfully continue to trade the business going forward. And again, that links to this. That safe pair of hands. They want you to be successful. They want you set up for success as the new owner of that business. So you can counter any net current asset issues in the negotiation, and these are actually set inside of the letter of intent, which is what you do in the deal layer, but you can overcome any of this again by leveraging all the value that you've built inside of that foundation layer. The other issue that could come up in closing is what we call an increased order book. And what happens with an increased order book, we covered it before in the confidence erosion, is going through the final stages of the deal, the seller may win a big new contract and then all of a sudden wants to change the valuation of the deal to reflect the new business that is likely to come in the future. And again, we can't do that. As I mentioned, we can only value a business on the historic performance up to the time of doing the deal. We can't pay for things that are likely to happen in the future. And again, we deal with that through earnouts, which I covered before. And then the final part of the closing layer is what we call seller warranties and indemnities. And this is like your insurance policy. So yes, there's due diligence that's carried out on the deal, but you're going to want the seller to provide you with certain warranties and indemnities that what you're buying is what you think you're buying. And it's kind of a safety net. So if anything slips through due diligence or anything happens in the future, because we're generally buying businesses with seller financing, we can offset any future claims in terms of that deal. So an example would be, let's say some legal due diligence has been done and the seller failed to disclose that there was some pending legal litigation from an employer. Let's say an employee had been fired, they were fired wrongly, and they're now going to sue or litigate against the business. Now, your lawyer that's doing the due diligence is not a mind reader. If the seller doesn't tell your lawyer what's going on, then obviously they're not going to find out. But they sign a warranty and an indemnity so that if something like that happens in the future, you can claim that back from the seller and you can deduct it even from the amount of seller financing. So that's the 3-layer process that I use to negotiate all of my deals. Again, you might not need every single one of these. You might only have 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 here, and 3 or 4 here. But understanding what they all are and knowing when to use them, depending on what stage of the deal you're at, will make you an absolute negotiation ninja. And there you have it. You're now a master of negotiation. You've got these 18 steps to use when negotiating the buying or the selling of a business. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps and gets you one step closer to buying a business. But if you're just getting started inside of your deal making journey, then I've got an amazing free gift for you. You can click the upper right corner of this video or in the description below for the link to my free business buying blueprint, how to own an established profitable business in under 99 days using none of your own money. So get your copy for free by following that link. And thanks again for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe to our channel and like this particular video. And in Dealmaker Wealth Society, we're uploading new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays and always sharing plenty of more tools and tips, mindset tricks and more to really help you jumpstart the lifestyle of your dreams. So that's all for today. Stay tuned for more from the Dealmaker Wealth Society. I'm Carl Allen. I will see you soon. Until then, bye for now.